As a fourth-generation entrepreneur and business owner, I know the grit and grind that it takes to run a business. With ChingonSA, we're capturing stories from other local business owners and sharing them with you, our querido community of San Anto. From the culture, for the culture. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of ChingonSA. I'm Luis. I'm the host of the show, and we're coming to you once again from the MIG studios. Super excited about today's guest. Some of you may know who he is, some of you may not, and we're really excited to introduce Albert Gonzales to you guys. Just before we get into the show, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, sharing the episodes on your social media. It really helps us get out the word for the show, so I want to thank you guys for doing that. But super excited to bring on Albert Gonzales, known on Instagram as Trebla Art. If you have not had an opportunity to check him out, be sure. We'll obviously put links in the show notes below. But be sure to, he's a great follow, really good stuff, and his artwork is amazing. So Albert is a visionary post-contemporary artist based here in San Antonio, entirely self-taught, which I think is amazing. We're going to get into that for sure. He's carved out a vibrant creative path rooted in authenticity, intuition, and color. And if you have seen some of his work, you definitely know there's a lot of color involved there. His art blurs boundaries between gallery and street, fine art, and community, often weaving abstract floral motifs with themes of family, identity, and healing. I love that. Albert's career has taken him from grassroots pop-up to major exhibitions. His solo shows, including Step Inside My Mind and Step Inside My Mind Part 2, have captivated audiences while participating in citywide events like Luminaria, Chalk It Up, and the Coca-Cola Final Four Music Festival. His work has been featured across Texas and New York with key exhibitions at the Blue Star Contemporary, Dock Space Gallery, Centro de Artes, and the Riverband Church in Austin. Albert, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, Dave? Yeah,
thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be a part of it.
Yeah, man. I've been a huge fan from a distance for a little while. I think one of the things that made me reach out to you initially was you recently posted on Instagram what you called your 1 minute story. And I thought, what a good opportunity to kind of reach out and give you a platform to share really, a little more detail about what your story is, because I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I was sitting down with a friend of mine, Jessica, who's an amazing creative director, and we had this meeting about sharing information and how we want that information, received, and especially now with like social media, storytelling's like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for me it was really ironic, right? Because it's like I'm editing the video and I'm just like, I need to keep it short.
Yeah.
And so at first it was gonna be like a 30-second, and then I was like, you know what? Like my story is like so vast, and there's so many cool little stories within this huge story. Like 1 minute was really tough for me to like sum everything up, but
yeah, for sure.
I was glad I was able to connect, and here I am today to share that. But I quit my job in 2014, and I told myself that I was gonna just go after this dream of being a full-time self-taught professional artist.
Yeah.
I at that time I thought it was the craziest thing ever. It was something that was just very like spontaneous. Before that, growing up in elementary school all the way to like high school, I was always.
What part of town did you grow up in?
I grew up on the south side and the west side.
Okay.
And so, literally, I went to Lowell Middle School, which, if you're not familiar where it's at, it's pretty much on the border of the south side and the west side.
Yeah.
Once you cross over, the Frio City, train tracks.
Yeah.
Like I had this idea of doing this like street art installation one day, where I'm gonna have like a pop-up on one side of the train tracks that's going to say welcome to the south side, and then like literally like right across the other side of the train tracks it's going to say welcome to the west side.
Oh, cool.
And so they're going to be like facing each other. So that's like a future thing that I want to be doing. But I grew up in that area, Zarzamora. Nice. I say anywhere in Zarzamora is like the back of my hand. Like my parents were divorced, so we moved around a lot. Lived with my grandma for a little bit as well, me and my mom. And so it was a really interesting upbringing, but I was talking about it with one of my really good friends yesterday. It's like, if you are past Theo and Malone, you're more of like South Side.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you grew up like right like on that border of like West Side and South Side, you're like a hybrid,
right?
Because like you get to experience the West Side and the South Side,
Yeah.
and so I like to claim the South Side and the West Side.
There you go.
And I'm very.
What
proud
high school
of
did you
that.
go to?
Lanier. Proud of the West Side, baby.
Yeah.
And so, I love the fact that, the South Side is like that middle place between the West Side and the East Side, and two very cultured areas in the city.
For sure.
And San Antonio has like that rich historic culture of, so many good and so many bad things. But I feel like with that energy that San Antonians bring, especially from these areas, it's like, hey, we're going to get stuff done no matter what.
Yeah.
Like regardless what issues we're facing, like we're going to be for the people, and we're going to keep, just empowering each other.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my career has literally just been that, like me going with that gut feeling, me trying to just advocate for, my fellow artists, fellow San Antonians, and just trying to put good out in the world, doing my street art, trying to make art accessible, and just trying to persevere, because being an artist is tough. Being an entrepreneur is super tough. But
what did you do before you were an artist? I'm just curious.
I was in banking. I was one of my first like banking positions. I was a personal online banker with Citibank, and this is probably back in like 2011.
Yeah.
I moved around a lot in different jobs. Like for me, ever since like high school, even while I was in high school, like I worked at La Fiesta. I'm not sure if any of y'all remember La Fiesta, but like that was like my first job at La Fiesta was, putting stuff.
Is that still around?
I hope so.
Yeah.
It was a spot for, the fajitas and all that stuff. But my first job was La Fiesta. And then like every couple of months, it was funny because it was like an inside joke between like my friends growing up. It's like, man, like what job you got now?
Yeah.
But I was always searching for like better pay, and I was always searching for like that ideal work schedule, which is like that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And if I could, at that time find something that was going to pay me more and still maintain that 9 to 5, like I was going to jump ship. Yeah. And so eventually, my last position was coverage determinations for the CVS pharmacy and their back office. And so pretty much I just sat in a cubicle and just looked over people's contracts for their insurance policies.
What was the catalyst to you deciding, you know what, I don't want to work in corporate America, I want to go off on my own and do this thing?
This one night I had a dream, and before that I had this encounter with someone that said, you know what, I bet if you were an artist you'd be amazing at it. I was just drawing on like a napkin, and this person couldn't believe that I wasn't a proclaimed artist. And so,
really?
Yeah. And so it wasn't until like weeks later, because subconsciously that stuck with me.
Sure.
In that moment I was just like, yeah, whatever, dude. But subconsciously that stuck with me. Eventually, go to work, and I was always doodling. Again, I never called myself an artist, but someone said, hey, like, who's creative or who likes to doodle? I'm like, first guy raising my hand. And one night, at that time I was living back at my mom's house. I was incurring all this like debt, and my roommate before had bailed on me, and I was in this really sucky position. Yeah. And my mom was charging me rent. Like anytime I lived with my mom, it wasn't like, oh, mijo, you need to get back on your feet. Right. We live here for free. It was never that. It was like, I'll give you a discount. But, that was it. But
you get the family discount.
Yeah. But at that time, I was trying to, save some money, but I really wasn't, because I was in this like circle of like partying and, being dumb.
Yeah.
And you were financially irresponsible.
Yeah. But I think that's youth, right?
Yeah. But I was 24, and I didn't really have anything going for me. I wasn't in school, and then again, like just doing stuff that wasn't really, And so, eventually I would go to work, and when things were slow, I would kind of have like that fantasy of like, oh, if I was an artist, I'd be not here, doing stuff and getting paid for it, which it's always funny, because when we think about our dreams and our like goals long term, especially when we're fantasizing about it, it's always like point A and point B.
Right.
It's not like that. Like it's always A through Z and like all those
Sure.
hardships in between. And
That's
so
a great point to make, man.
yeah, and so I would think about it like that, right? And then so, that happens a couple of weeks, and then one night, I remember I'm looking down at my bed, and I had a little twin-size bed, and I didn't even have a car at this time either. I have my helmet, my bike, and my work clothes for the next day. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, how much I hated that position that I was in.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I appreciate everything that my mom and my stepfather were doing for me at that time to, like, help me out. But at the same time, I was like, I'm not going anywhere with this. Like,
right.
And I wasn't saving any money. And so that night, I had this dream where I was, like, an artist. And it was, like, so vivid and so beautiful. And it was just one of those, like, inspiring, vivid dreams.
Yeah.
And that next morning, I wake up, I'm running late to work. Thankfully, my mom lived near where I worked at that time, so I would ride my bike to work. And at this time, I have this like adrenaline rush, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get to work. And I get to work right on time. That adrenaline is still in me. I go to turn on my computer, and this is like back when everyone had those Dell computers in their office.
Yeah.
I go to turn it on, and you hear it all like, and then an error screen pops up, and I'll never forget. Like once I see that error, like the adrenaline starts to like leave my body, and I feel it from like the top of my head all the way down to my toes, just like leaving. And I remember just feeling so like disgusted, and the thought comes to my head of like, oh, I bet if I was an artist, I could have used that adrenaline, that energy to do something positive or productive. But now I'm going to be sitting here for 9 hours.
Right.
And so as that thought comes to my head, I'm like, oh, you know what? The computer's going to boot. I'll just doodle while, things get back on track.
Yeah.
And so at that time, my manager, we had this inside joke where he would always be like, oh, I'm going to write you up, Albert. You're going to be the first guy, fired for drawing too much or this and that. And well, he tells me that this time, and he's like, hey, I'm going to write you up. And I'm like, I quit. I can't do this no more. And he's like, oh, dude, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
he thought you were joking.
Yeah. And I was like, no, like, I'm serious. And I always think about it now. It's like, man, like, he was looking out for me, too, because he looks, he leans forward, and he's like, hey, maybe you want to put, like, 2 weeks notice or give me a letter of resignation just so that you're rehireable in case it doesn't work out. And I'm like, nah, I'm leaving now. And he's like, all right, man, okay. And I see all my coworkers, all these people that were older than me that, when we got into that training class, everyone was like, man, we're set. This is a good job. Work your way up, get your benefits, this and that.
Sure.
And I'm this young 24-year-old kid. And I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. But now I'm like leaving this position and all my coworkers in their cubicles.
The safety, the stability, leaving all of that behind.
Yeah, I'll never forget looking back, thinking like people were like, man, that's what's up. Thinking that was going to be the scene, but everyone's just like, man, what's this guy doing?
Yeah, he's throwing away his life.
Yeah.
Throwing away an opportunity.
And that was like a awakening too, because I'm just like, well, like this isn't going how I expected it to. And they get the security.
You always imagine that. You remember that movie with Tom Cruise where he gets up and says, who's going with me? And
Jerry Maguire?
Jerry Maguire, there you go, yeah. And, who's going with me? And he's looking around the room and nobody's getting up. And finally one person, and he's like, all right, that's what I needed.
Yeah, I was more on like the show me the money, but money. Money was showing up. But I remember, I didn't have money saved up. I was living paycheck to paycheck, paying my mom rent.
Yeah.
And so I remember leaving with like the little stuff that I had out of the office and just thinking in my head, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you don't even know the first step of selling art or creating art.
Sure.
Or
creating a business around it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, I eventually got home. My mom was like, what are you doing home? And I had to explain to her and how like I was still going to make rent. I might have been a little bit late, but I was going to figure it out. And then, just from there, it just transpired into like me making these like difficult decisions and putting myself in positions that I never thought I'd be in.
Yeah.
I was on the streets and couch surfing primarily. I maybe stayed out in 1 or 2 places where it's like out in the open, but I never was really like sleeping on the streets. For me, it was always like an IHOP or, you know, stuff like that, where I would just get back on the bus and repeat. But every single day, you know, for like a whole year, I was figuring out ways to be on the street corners of San Antonio and trying to sell my art, you know, back when they were doing all the construction on the Macy's, that's now Dave & Buster's. Like, I'll never forget, like, pushing the fence that they used to have to, like, block off for the construction. Like, I would get there really early in the morning before they started doing any work, and I would, like, lean, like, really hard into the fence so it starts to, like, you know, go inwards. Just enough to where, like, the roof of, like, the Macy's walk-in area was, like, giving me a little bit of shade. And sometimes, like, the workers would be like, hey, man, don't be doing that. But sometimes, like, they'd be like, man, like, this guy ain't bothering nobody. But
you're talking about over at River Center. In downtown. So that's where you started selling your work, was downtown at River Center?
Yeah, right there. For now, it's the entrance to, like, Dave & Buster's and that whole new area. Like, when they were building all that out, they had it all blocked off, and I would push that fence in for that construction, and I would set up, like, right there. Like, I would try to get as much shade as I could, but there was times where I wasn't able to. So, like, you know, nowadays, you know, when it's like 100 something degrees, like, I vividly remremember what it was like being out there trying to sell art and not.
It's important to remember those days, right? Like the early stages, the beginning, because it kind of keeps you humble in a sense, right? As a business owner, even as an artist, not forget about the business aspect of it, but to remember where you came from, to remember where, you know, the struggles that you went through to get to where you are today. Oh yeah.
And even now, like, I appreciate even more. So, like, when I'm in my studio, and if I know that it's going to be like a really nice day, like, I take the time to, like, you know, and I'm going to go out and paint like the way I used to.
Nice.
And, you know, there's something very organic about, like, just being out there with people and engaging with them. And it's also, like, a great form of marketing. You know, it's guerrilla marketing. I'm not necessarily, like, paying to be at an event, but, you know, San Antonio's 3 million people, and we have tourists that are coming in not just for freaking conventions, but almost every week someone's graduating from the Air Force Academy.
That's right.
And you got, you know, another couple thousand people. And that's one thing that I don't think a lot of people really comprehend when it comes to, like, how valuable the street marketing is here in San Antonio. Like, you got people from all over the world, like, walking through the streets of downtown San Antonio. So you got to capitalize on that.
There's a bit of a stigma, don't you think, though, about street artists that are going out there and I mean, I think it needs to be talked about, right? Because I don't think that every street artist is out there, you know, just trying to, you know, whatever. I think people are really proud of their art. They want to share it with the world, and they're not paying to rent a space or anything like that. But you know, they're looking for creative ways to get their artwork in front of people, and I think that's one way that they can do that. Is right.
And I think then it comes back to engaging. Like, you know, it's one thing to create work. You could go stand on the street corner of San Antonio, and, like, anyone could stand on a street corner with their art. But it's, how do you engage? You know, how do you talk to people? Are you smiling at people? Are you waving at people? You know, it makes a huge difference, you know, the ability to talk. And I feel like that's one thing that I've learned early on is, you know, closed mouths don't get fed, right? And so for me, it's just like, hey, you know what? I'm going to try to talk to everyone that looks at my art. Like, I learned that early on, like, when I was, like, trying to make money off my art for the very first time. I'm like, you know what? If I just stay painting and looking at my art and just glancing over and seeing who's looking, like, I'm always going to catch people looking. But it's like, how do I engage? So every time I saw someone looking, I said, hey, what do you think of my art? Oh, hey, what do you like about it? Oh, this and that. And I started, like, doing those, like, open questions, right? Like, it's not just yes or no questions. And
you're not trying to push a sale on somebody.
Exactly. And so I'm all about, like, how do I build a relationship? How do I get to know this person? And, you know, even if they don't like my art, at least they can like me. And so, you know, that, and it just goes from there. It's just like, you know, I just try to be genuine, trying to just be positive. I know, you know, early on in my career, I didn't really know a lot of people, but as I've been able to build relationships with people, it's like, oh, hey, you like doing this? Oh, I know someone in this field, or I know someone that's doing this. And it's just like,
you're a connector.
And so through that, it's allowed me to like be in circles and events and
For
stuff
sure.
where I never imagined being, but like just through communicating and talking to people through my art, that gives me the platform to be confident in what I'm doing, because it's coming from like a true, genuine place.
One thing I think that like even business owners, you know, who are not necessarily in the creative space, have to realize is that when somebody invites you into a room, you belong there, right? And you've got to walk in there with that confidence. And I think that we forget that sometimes, because I'm the same way, right? I mean, I own a business. I have for the last 15 years. And even sometimes I walk into a room thinking, man, I don't know that. I think somebody messed up when they invited me. You know, they sent the invitation to the wrong location, right? Or the wrong email. But when you walk in with that confidence, with that attitude that you belong, it changes the dynamic of the conversations that you're having with the people in the room, right?
Yeah, I had this experience recently because Alamo College's district just purchased one of my like largest paintings for their permanent collection, and they're creating this like very huge effort and mission to like start really incorporating local artists and just arts in general into their schools and building these collections like museum type or museum quality collections. And I was one of their first like purchases for that.
That's awesome.
Mission. And it was crazy. I get goosebumps. You know, I can see it too. It gives goosebumps just thinking about it. But they invited me to be a guest for this summit, and I didn't know like it's a summit. I never been to a summit, so I'm just like I don't know what to expect. But like it was just really cool to be invited to have a seat at the table and to like be able to be amongst people that are like making really big decisions for San Antonio's like education system on a collegiate level. Yeah. And like to be sitting there just like that fly in the wall at first, but then being able to engage and ask questions and, you know, have those conversations that sparks, you know, what can be, you know, very positive changes in the city. Yeah. And yeah, it's just really wild to think about. But yeah, like having that confidence really does make a huge difference. Yeah, and we just gotta remember that sometimes, like you said.
I'm curious, man. How did you come up with the Trebla name? What is the significance there?
All right, so the funny story is, I couldn't really come up with anything that sounded really cool, and then I was just like writing stuff out, and I wrote my name, and then I decided to write my name backwards, and I'm like sounding it out. I'm like Albert Trebla, and I'm like, Trebla sounds pretty cool. And so I thought it was really cool for like the longest time. Or I still think it is still really cool. But what was funny, the funny part about it is that I would have people like follow me on Instagram, and occasionally I'll like run into people on the streets, and they would be like, "Oh, it's Trebla, this and that, let's talk." And then the question always came up, what does Trebla mean? Yeah. And if you could imagine the look of disappointment on someone's face when you just like, oh, it's just my name backwards. Yeah. Like I think I maybe had a couple like unfollows. Oh, like, oh no, I'm just playing.
He's not as cool as I thought he was. Yeah.
But it was funny because it became an inside joke for me and my wife, because like if we were out and then someone's like, oh, it's Trebla, she would give me that side eye like, oh, you're about to disappoint this person. And so that question always came up, right? And so one night, me and my wife were having some wine, and we're just having a laugh, and I was like, you know, I think I'm very funny. I think I'm really funny, and I told my wife, I was like, man, I'm tired of just disappointing everybody. Yeah. Like I see it in their heart. Like they don't even like me no more when I'm telling her I'm just being super sarcastic. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna come up with an acronym for Trebla. And she rolls her eyes. She's like, yeah, like, well, what are you going to come up with? Yeah. And it took me like 100 tries. I couldn't even get past the R. And she was like, just give up. Like, it does not sound cool. Like, you're going to make people more disappointed. Right. and finally, I sat down, kind of meditated a little bit. And then it finally hit me. And now it's like the coolest acronym that it's very poetic. Time resolves everything, but love answers.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Time resolves everything, but love answers. That's awesome, man. What does that mean to you
It's just
on
like,
a deeper level? Like
yeah, on the deeper level for me, it's like, yeah, like you could forgive, right? Like you could forgive anything. Like, again, my parents my parents had divorce.
Sure.
And that relationship between me and my parents wasn't always like the best.
Sure.
Right. So the idea that like time resolves everything, it's like, yeah, like as you move forward, like things are going to resolve themselves.
Right.
Like if you keep being positive, things are going to be resolved. But like if you go into it with love and you have that intention of just like forgiving and just loving, like being who you are, being genuine, and being a nice person to others, like trying to help others, like things just have their way of just like working out the way they need to. Like if you don't carry a grudge, if you're not like spiteful or anything, and if you just act with love, like everything has its way of answering. It might not happen exactly when you want that thing to happen,
Right. But
like I could guarantee you, like if you just act with love, things have their way of just like answering.
Man, I think that's so prevalent in your artwork. If I'm being honest with you, like what I see in your artwork is simple, but like in the best way. I don't mean that as an insult, right? Like simple in the best way, but like so powerful in its message. And man, just thank you for that. That's really awesome.
I've been really, really lucky, and again, a little bit goosebumps too. But I've been really lucky that like my work's able to like leave such a positive impact for people, and it makes me really happy to know that like people feel that way about my art because it's coming from a place of a lot of struggle,
for sure.
A lot of pain, especially from my upbringing. Feeling alone a lot growing up. Like there's some paintings that I've created that are very cathartic, that are about like these very dark times, but being able to create something that connects on a very powerful level and a positive light, it means the world to me because I remember being that kid and having suicidal thoughts, and I remember just feeling so alone, and just to know that like people feel empowered and people feel happy and positive. Like if there's one thing that I can, leave as like a legacy, like my art, and then that story, that influence and that positivity, I hope, people throughout time, if my work gets to be up for the next, 200 years, I hope that it still gets to make people feel positive.
I have no doubt that will absolutely happen, man. I'm curious, you talk about legacy, you talk about your art being your legacy. What does that look like for you? Do you envision your art being in museums? Do you envision your art? I know you do a lot of street art right now, and and one thing that I want to ask you about as well is like the street art that you're doing now that you're kind of putting up in random places throughout town. But like long term, like where do you see that legacy going? Like how do you express that legacy?
Man, I have some like really ambitious goals, and some of my wife especially, but some of my like really close friends can kind of explain. Like sometimes I'll share these ideas out loud, and not necessarily like the full game plan. A lot of times I'll keep that to myself, but I'll share like these really ambitious ideas that I have for like 25, 50 years of like what I imagine.
Sure.
And they're very, very ambitious, but like that legacy is like going after those. And even though it's like, it's street art and all this other stuff, and doing my entrepreneurial stuff on the side, and really trying to generate these things on my own, and doing it in the right way, right, and giving these things time. I think like that patience, that legacy of like I'm doing this art, but like behind the scenes, like with all the support that I'm getting from people behind the scenes, I'm working on all these other things. And nice. I think that's one thing that a lot of my supporters, and especially some of my biggest collectors, like really enjoy. It's like, I'm always like working on the stuff that I put out for people to see. There's also like a lot of stuff like behind closed doors that like I'm slowly working on and putting pieces together. Like I have a lot of domains, and one that I'm very proud of that I'm working on is artstudiotours.com, And so I'm working on making stuff accessible for people, and especially for tourism in San Antonio. There's a big gap that needs to be filled on making artwork accessible, not just for San Antonians, but for people that want to visit and get like a true, like, grassroots San Antonio art experience.
Sure.
I want to fulfill that gap.
But also, I think it's important for people to know that it exists here, right? Because I don't really think that San Antonio is well known for being a community of artists. Right?
It's a very affordable place for artists to live and to work, but as far as like a market, it's not like one of the primary markets in Texas.
Sure.
But you can make a living as an artist in San Antonio. It's just not well known as for art sales. There's a lot of collectors in San Antonio, but they're not really spending their money here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
They're going to Houston, Dallas, Lockhart, Austin, these prominent places that are, justified for showing great art and showing San Antonio artists and making, big moves. But as far as like commercial galleries, like we have a very small amount of commercial galleries here in San Antonio compared to, all these other spaces. But
how do we change that?
We need people to invest. We need people to the people that have money to spend like that. Yeah. We need them to, invest in the artist run spaces at least. But again, not just me advocating and trying to get people to spend money on the arts, but at the very least, we just need more people out at art events, and we need more people to spend what they can afford. Yeah. Take off that live, love, laugh. If you're watching this and you have live, love, laugh somewhere in your house, especially if you bought it, put it away and make an effort to like go find something to replace that.
I love that.
From, a local, art event, a local gallery. Don't be afraid to ask artists, like, what is this piece about? How much is this? Can I do payments on it? Yeah. Our artists are very easy to, well, I don't want to say easy to work with, because artists can be very difficult to work with, but at least I like to say that we're approachable. Yeah. And don't feel afraid to like ask questions. For sure. And so I think it's just all about making art accessible and really advertising that like, and that's another reason why I do my street art is like, when you think about street art, like what area do you think of, like when I say, or not street art, but when I say public art, like what areas of San Antonio do you I mean,
probably Blue Star would be the only thing that comes to mind. Maybe the Pearl a little bit.
It's very centralized, right?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
If I were to say, oh, public art past 1604, exactly, right? So it's like my whole idea is like I would just want to at least activate spaces with art, even if it's temporarily.
That's beautiful.
And so hopefully, I got notified that I didn't receive the grant for the artist, individual artist grant. So that's off the table. And so funny enough, like I had slowed down doing my street art because I was like, oh, I'm going to apply for this grant. And it's like a much larger mission than just doing street art. It was this idea of documenting each zip code installation with photography, journaling, and videos, and then putting together a book of all that, and then in celebration of this mission accomplished, hosting or creating a new annual street art event for the city that would highlight artists that are utilizing recycled materials to create street art installations throughout San Antonio.
That's beautiful.
And creating hubs during the event for people to go out and support local businesses, but also create opportunities for local artisans, local vendors, local sponsorships that can activate, certain bus routes that can get people on the buses. And there was a whole like big picture of like turning $15,000 into a potentially multi-million-dollar
project
event. But hey, Better luck next time.
Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe there's somebody out there who's listening, watching this. Property managers, if you're out there and you got a space for Albert, even temporarily, we got to get you guys connected.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of business owners and property owners that have vacant spots and they're not being utilized.
Yep.
And for artists, hey, like, give us something that's climate controlled. Even if it's not climate controlled, there's a small percentage of artists that will work with it.
You need it to be climate controlled, man, for sure.
Well, I have all these ideas of entrepreneurial, journeys and even like nonprofit stuff. Like I have this idea of I really want to start a nonprofit called The Cool Artists, and what I want to do is work with property owners that have vacant buildings that maybe been sitting for like 5 to 10 years, maybe 2 years, but incentivize them with putting ACs in their buildings and having them sign like a 5-year lease agreement where they would lease it to artists as like a commune, and so they get like a free AC for their building, and then we get a creative hub for whatever area that they're in, and then it gives the artists an opportunity to grow within 5 years, which with the right sort of planning and the right sort of programming, we could get artists on their feet, and then even set them up with HVAC training. Yeah,
there you go. That's awesome, man. So. Man, this has been such a fun conversation, super insightful. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing, your vision for the city, your vision for the creative community in San Antonio. I'd love to be a part of that in any way, shape, or form that I can. I'm glad that we were able to get you on the show, and just kind of help you lift that platform up. So
I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on the show, man. It's before we wrap up the conversation, if people want to connect with you, do you do commission work? Is it just street art?
I do commission work. My bread and butter are my paintings, so I sell my paintings out of my studio. I'm also represented.
Is your studio open? Like you can
by appointment only.
Appointment only,
so I'm over off of Mitchell and Probant near Highway 90 and Confluence Park. Yeah. And so I'm in that general area. Yeah. You can visit albertgonzalesart.com if you want to schedule a studio visit, or if you want to follow me on Instagram. I have all my stuff on there too. Is Trebla_art. Yeah. I'm also represented by a local gallery, an arte gallery off of Sunset and Broadway. So if you want to see any of my work and just walk into that gallery, they have a few of my pieces up there too. Nice. But if you want to buy a painting from me, you can contact me directly.
Awesome.
albertgonzalesart.com.
Awesome. Albert, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of ChingonSA. Thanks so much to Albert for coming on the show and for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week. This has been an MIG Studio and Serafina Digital production. Be sure to follow and subscribe the show on your favorite streaming platform. And tell a friend about the show by sharing this episode on your Facebook and TikTok. Last, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or someone doing something really cool in San Antonio and want to get your story on our show, email me at luis@myInsuranceGroup.com.